attempted coup. The story of Mwamba Luchembe and Steven Lungu, also known as Captain Solo. This story comes from Zambia in southern Africa. There are two people that are worth mentioning in the history of Zambia. They are former junior officers of the Zambia Army. They created a mark in the country's history by pulling off an attempt to overthrow the governments of the day. These are two coup attempts on government at two separate times in history. One was in 1990, led by Lieutenant Mwamba Luchembe, while the second was 7 years later in 1997 by Captain Steven Lungu, also called Captain Solo. Both men had woken up the country and announced in the early hours of the morning the takeover of government by the army at the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation. They kept the country on edge for some hours to follow. Mwamba Luchembe was born in the northern province in northern Rhodesia then, now called Zambia, on 14 February 1960. After finishing a secondary school education at Isoka Boys Secondary School, he had to serve in the National Service Training Program, which was compulsory for all after secondary school. He underwent this program at the Zambia National Service Camp in Kasama district. Upon completion, he joined the Zambia Army and went to Kohima Barracks to train as an officer in 1980 and was commissioned in November 1981. His specialty was in the field of signals. In the years that followed, there was a downturn in the economy of Zambia. The country was hit with high food prices. There was great dissatisfaction with the government then of Kenneth Kaunda. And in June of 1990, there erupted protests in form of food riots. Kenneth Kaunda, in defense, vowed to put an end to the riots. So on 24th June 1990, news broke in the barracks at Kaoma of these food riots that were taking place. Soldiers were being rounded up to quell the violence at the order of Kenneth Kaunda. Mwamba Luchembe was among those selected from Kaoma Barracks for this assignment to go to Lusaka and stop these riots. But Luchembe and other soldiers secretly expressed their unhappiness to each other on the way the ordinary Zambian was being treated and the state of the economy which also affected them as soldiers. The violence in these riots had claimed at the time about 24 lives, some shot by police, it is said, in some reports, with many others injured as well. This kind of conversation among Luchembe and the other soldiers led to a plan to overthrow the government of President Kenneth Kaunda. A plan was put together and placed in motion. It involved Mwamba Luchembe, who, having a background in signals in the Zambia Army, was placed in the operation to disrupt communication in terms of telephones and airport control. He was also in that operation to seize the mass media complex and announce on Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation on TV and radio the takeover of the country. The operation was undertaken in the cover of the night. And around 03 hours in the morning on 1st July 1990, the mass media complex was successfully seized and Luchembe announced on the Zambia National Broadcasting airwaves the coup and overthrow of Kaunda's government. It is said that there was great jubilation in many parts of hearing the overthrow of Kaunda, who had at the time ruled Zambia for 26 years under a one-party state system with no opposition parties. Exchange of gunfire was reported around State House, the president's residence. However, government reported no injuries or deaths. In other reports, it is said that the State House guards may have fired on civilians celebrating the overthrow of Kaunda, who had come to gather around State House. The Western media reported seeing dead bodies then. Kenneth Kaunda was not in Lusaka at the time of the coup. He had gone to Ndola. However, this coup attempt was short-lived, as around 07 hours in that same morning, security forces loyal to Kenneth Kaunda surrounded the mass media complex with tanks and armored vehicles. They managed to overpower Luchembe and his soldiers, and they were arrested. It is believed that Lieutenant Mwamba Luchembe had planned this operation with other senior officers, but they disappointed him by not showing up, as they developed cold feet after their takeover was announced. At 09:15 hours, Mr. Gray Zulu, the General Secretary of the ruling party, the United National Independence Party, UNIP, announced on radio and television that the government was still in control and the coup attempt was carried out by an indisciplined soldier. This coup attempt really created a dent in Kaunda's political power. He subsequently gave in while under pressure to allow multi-party politics in Zambia a short time later, which saw the elections of 31st October 1991, where Kaunda was defeated. 7 years later, a similar operation was undertaken, this time by Captain Steven Lungu of the Zambia Army. Captain Steven Lungu, also known as Captain Solo, was born in Mansa on 6 January 1962. On 28 October 1997, with a Captain Jack Chiti as his accomplice, led soldiers who broke into the armory after assaulting army officers. They took weapons and headed to Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation, which they seized. Captain Solo went on the airwaves at 06 hours to announce that the government of Frederick Chiluba, then president, had been overthrown. He claimed to represent the National Redemption Council. He gave President Frederick Chiluba until 09 hours that morning to surrender. Gunfire was heard around the mass media complex. However, again, this was a short-lived operation, as troops loyal to the government managed to storm the Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation, and the coup was quelled. Captain Solo and 54 other soldiers were arrested. Although many Zambians at the time were dissatisfied with the government and the economy, this coup attempt did not, in many circles, receive support. Lieutenant Mwamba Luchembe later was freed under Kaunda's declaration of a general amnesty for all political inclined offences before the October 1991 elections. As for Captain Solo, he was convicted of treason and sentenced to death, but later commuted to a life sentence by President Levi Mwanawasa. He was pardoned by President Rupia Banda in December of 2010 after being in prison for 13 years. Steven Lungu, also known as Captain Solo, died on 11th August 2012 at the age of 50.